Hey guys, and welcome to Gwent, the Witcher card game. My name is Jaggerous, and today CD Projekt Red had another dev stream, and they showcased a bunch of new cards coming to the game. And before we jump into that and have a look, I want to briefly mention 4 cards that they have actually changed that are existing. So the first one you can see here is Milena, 7 power, and now she's an ambush card. And after 2 turns, she'll flip over, and when she flips over, she charms the highest bronze or silver enemy with 5 power or less. And charm is the kind of thing that Succubus does, for example, where it takes a card from your opponent's side and puts it on your side. Same with Muzzle. So after 2 turns, she'll flip and take a card of up to 5 power, which makes her potentially 15 power. I feel like her strength is a little bit kind of situational though. You know, you have to play her early enough that you can get that power and there has to be a target, otherwise she's just 7 power. But on the flip side, you know, she's also a ambush unit, so they might think it's Teruvial, they might think it's Moren, and you can play those kind of mind games with your opponent. So it'll be interesting to see that. So next up we have Bloody Baron. He is a Temerian officer and he's now 9 power. Whenever an enemy is destroyed, boost self by 1 wherever it is. So this means that Baron, he now boosts if he's in your hand. It doesn't just have to be in your deck, so you can hold him in your hand, kill a bunch of units and get him quite powerful and then play him. He doesn't now then move to the top of the deck at the end of each turn, which I think he previously did, but it's a little bit of a buff so that, you know, if you have him in your hand, you're still gaining that power for removal. So next up we have Draug. And Draug, as you know previously, he resurrected units from the graveyard, and you could pick one from your opponent's graveyard and one from yours and turn them into Draugirs, and it depended on the strength of the units in your graveyard. He's been completely changed now, so he resurrects units as 1 power Draugirs until you fill that unit's row. So we don't know what the row limits are, so we don't know what the cap is on Draugir, but he is a fantastic swarm card, because if you play him, you can resurrect units and fill the row, but it has to have units in your graveyard, because he's basically taking those units out of your graveyard and turning them into Draugir. So he is removing units from your graveyard, so there is a condition on him. You can't play him, you know, first card of the game when your graveyard is empty, then he's just going to be 8 power. But at the end of a game, you know, this could be a very powerful swarm effect and a really nice finisher. And last but not least, we have Cahir, who is an officer and doomed, and you can see he's 1 power and he resurrects a leader. Now, interestingly, he's doomed, which means that you can't take him from your opponent with, say, like a Han Marvin's Blue Dream, for example, but they've removed the requirement for Nilfgaard leaders. So maybe they've removed the requirement because he's doomed. However, in the dev stream, they did tease that he would be good in the new game mode. So potentially, because he no longer has a faction requirement, this potentially suggests that the new game mode might have cross-faction play, and we've had some suggestions to that, you know, with crewmen on combat engineers, for example. There have been some things that have suggested that maybe that will be the case, so that's maybe a clue towards that with the game mode as well, as was teased in the dev stream. But, you know, if you guys have other interpretations of that, then let me know in the comments below. But without further ado, let's have a look at some new cards. So here we go into the neutral pool, and now we have Doppler. Transform into a bronze unit from your faction. So at the moment, this is a completely random unit. You don't have a choice, like the spawn mechanic that we talked about earlier, which has actually been renamed Create. However, on the dev stream, they said they might be adding a Create option to this, such that when you play the Doppler, you get a choice of 3 units from whatever faction you're playing, and that is the thing that he turns into. And actually on the dev stream, they said that Create, the way it works is that you draw from the neutral pool in your faction pool, whereas previously it was suggested that you draw from the entire pool of the game. So it might be interesting to see if they've actually toned Spawn or Create back, such that you actually only draw from your faction and the neutral pool, rather than from like across factions, because that was something that a lot of people complained about, and maybe that is the case. And I actually quite like that change. I think it makes Create a bit more lucrative, I guess, if it's from, you know, just your faction. I think it makes it a little bit easier to balance, but we'll have to kind of wait and see in that regard. But let me know what you guys think of that in the comments below, whether you think, if that's something that CDPR does, whether if it's faction specific or neutral, whether that's something that you'd like to see, or what, or if you just, you know, you hate Spawn and Create and all that. Next up in here, we have Black Blood Alchemy Special Item. So this is an item. Choose one. Spawn a bronze or silver necrophage or vampire. Now, because this is a neutral card, that means it can spawn from any faction. That's what they said on the dev stream, that it will pull from any faction, which means that I guess faction-specific cards don't pull from any faction. So Black Blood, pull from any faction, a necrophage or vampire. I believe there are some vampires in non-Nilfgaard monsters faction, and probably some necrophages in non-monsters faction. Or destroy a silver necrophage, bronze or silver necrophage or vampire. This is a bit odd. You know, like, how many situations is destroying vampires going to be useful? I think mostly you would use this for spawning, and you have to decide whether there are silver necrophagous or vampires which synergize with your deck. Again, it's a spawn mechanic, or a create mechanic, so something that I'm, you know, a little bit wary of, and I guess it remains to be seen. Next up, we have this crazy card, Shup's Big Adventure. If your starting deck has no duplicates, so you have to make a deck with 0 duplicates, then you can send Shup on an adventure. And when you play Shup, you can choose whether he becomes Shup Mage, which I believe had 4 strength, Shup Hunter, which I believe had 8 strength, or Shup Knight, which I believe had 12 strength. And then, depending on which Shup that you play, you then draw 3 cards out of a pool of 5. So in total, this card can play 3 different Shups and 15 different effects. And they haven't really shown us what the effects do. They've said, for example, Shup Knight has a duel effect, and that Shup Mage has like a draw effect. We can draw a card. So it'll be very intriguing to see how this works. But the requirement of having no duplicates, I think, is a bit high. So I don't know if this card will see competitive play, but it's a very interesting card at any rate. And next up we have Sea Hill. This card, however, I think is really strong, and I think this card will see a lot of play. It's a fantastic card for new players because it fits into any deck. It's a neutral. And basically you can choose one. So you can deal 3 damage to all enemies with odd power. And it's only enemies, so that's good. You can deal 3 damage to all enemies with even power, and it's only enemies, so that's good. Or you can summon a random bronze or silver unit from your deck. So you pull a random bronze or silver from your deck, which is also good. You know, that could be very important if you've thinned your deck a lot. This could basically pull a win condition, you know? So all in all, I think this card is really strong. I mean, admittedly, it kind of encourages people to play units of mixed value in terms of odd and even. But I think this is a really powerful card, and I think there's actually a lot of even units and a lot of odd units. So I think you'll often see a lot of value out of this card. You know, you only need 3 units and you get 9 power, 4 units is 12 power, 5 units, 15 power. Suddenly it starts to rack up. And especially on a long round when, you know, some decks play a lot of units, or decks which play swarms, like Draug, for example, where you have a swarm of 1 strength units. If you play this, they'll die. So it's an interesting card. And I think this will see a lot of play. So next up we have monsters, and you can see here Lamia. Deal 4 damage to an enemy. If the enemy is under Moonlight, deal 7 damage instead. And on the dev stream this said Blood Moon. So this, I guess, suggests that you can play Moonlight on your opponent, right? Because Moonlight if your enemy is under Moonlight, whereas this one is when it's in Moonlight. So I would suggest that Moonlight can be played on either row, and a Chinese leak did suggest that as well. So we deal damage, and that's a 9. Basically it's a 9. But if you have Moonlight, which I guess also will give you some sort of benefit, then it becomes a 12. And, you know, 7 points of removal is pretty decent. So I think the Moonlight deck, honestly, is going to be really strong. And I look forward to making a kind of Siren Werewolf Moonlight deck. I think that's something I'm really excited for in the new patch. Next up, we have Bridge Troll. Move a hazard on an enemy row to a different row. I like this effect. I really like this effect, especially with Dagon. And if this Moonlight on your opponent is a hazard, then you can move that around too. It means that when your opponent moves units, you can kind of move the weather with them. And often you have that issue that as soon as you play weather, your opponent stops playing units into that weather. This gives monsters a real kind of edge in that they can do that. And it also means if your opponent clears weather on one row, so say you're playing Drought or Ragnarok, if your opponent clears weather on one row, you can just drag another row's worth of weather in. So I think with gold weathers, Bridge Troll is really interesting because it means that your opponent needs to be clearing all weather with like a clear skies rather than doing row specific clears. So this is kind of a nerf to row specific clears, and you know, people hate weather, so we'll see how this works out. And last but not least in monsters, we have the lovely Wispess Tribute relic. Play a bronze or silver organic card from your deck. So this is just tutoring. You can target draw a bronze or silver organic card and play it. Parasite, for example, is an organic card. So this has actually made Parasite a lot better. I said Parasite was a bit but now if you can tutor Parasite with Wispess, that puts 6 strength on the body plus the 12, so that becomes an 18-point play, and you can choose. So I always think that target draw is really good. Alternatively, I believe Lacerate is organic, for example, so you can use this to target draw a Lacerate, which again can lead to a lot of value. And I always think cards where they target draw a specific card are always going to be strong, because there'll be situations where that is really viable. Maybe not in the current patch, but in future patches, for example. So I like this card, and I think it's a decent card. So then we have the lovely Nilfgaard, and first off we have Recruit. 1 strength. Play a random bronze or silver unit from your deck. Oh, sorry, bronze soldier unit from your deck. Bronze soldier. And you might be thinking, you know, oh, why would I want to play that? You know, I don't want to draw randomly. But this is kind of like Dwarven Agitator, except that it's summon rather than spawn. But basically, if you only have 3, or if you only have 1 kind of soldier in your deck, this is effectively thinning. So if you can make a deck with 1 kind of soldier, you've got thinning here, plus a 1 strength body, just adding a little bit more power. So ultimately, I feel like that could be quite useful. And then this sneaky neutral deck that I've been joking about making, where you play your opponent's deck. So you could then recruit, and that helps you to draw your slave hunters, not slave hunters, sorry, your slave drivers, and then you can spawn one of your opponent's cards. So this is giving you targeted draw for this, for example. Actually, no, it's not. This is an officer. I thought this was a soldier. It's giving you targeted draw for slave hunters. For charming units, it's giving you targeted draw for other soldiers. And it's an interesting card. Next up, we have Gate. Nilfgaardian Gate, to be precise. Tactic, special. Play a bronze or silver officer from your deck and boost it by 2. So this guy's an officer. And this is, again, is targeted draw, so it's not random, so you can choose. So you can find an officer and choose it. And I think Nilfgaard, it has a lot of decent officers, so it's going to be kind of interesting to see how that works. You know, you can use Nilfgaardian Gate with Reamed, with this new card as well, Vrighef. Play a bronze machine from your deck. So again, this is targeted draw of a bronze machine, so you can use Nilfgaardian Gate to draw an officer, to draw a machine, things like Rot Tossers and Trebuchets, for example. And again, I think these kind of tutoring cards are going to be really strong. And I feel like there will definitely be decks where they have viability. Onwards, we have Northern Realms, and you can see here, Kaedweni Revenant, Cursed Soldier Kaedwen. Whenever you play a spell, spawn a copy of this unit on a random row. Don't repeat. So we play him, then we play a spell, and then he spawns another 4 points. But he's only 4 points when you play him. Like, at base strength, he's initially a 4-point play. So he's a very low tempo play. So I'm a bit concerned with this guy as to whether he'll be useful. I mean, you know, there are strong spells, but he only triggers once, and then you get 2 8s. They're both cursed, though. So, you know, he has cursed synergies. You could transform it into an 8 with the Cursed Knight, for example. He has cursed synergies with the Damned Sorceress, and because it's on a random row, you can spread them out. So there are some cursed synergies, but I'm not entirely sure exactly how that is going to work in terms of cursed units. You can also spawn it with Ada, so I guess you could go Ada into Kaedwen because it's cursed, but we'll see. Next up, we have Kaedweni Knight. Boost this unit by 5. It is played from the deck to armor. So if you can reinforcements out this unit, it becomes a 13 with 2 armor. But if you play it from hand, it's an 8. So if there's ways that you can draw this card from your deck, say with Reaver Scouts, if you can Reaver Scout out this card, that, you know, makes it a 13-point play. So you play 1, you reinforcements 1, you Reaver Scouts the other, and basically if you can draw it from your deck, then it's extra points. So it's like a thinning card. But I'm just a little bit concerned that there's not enough ways to really play it, and that if you draw it, it's kind of a bit awkward, and you're gonna have to mulligan it, and then, you know, we'll kind of see. Although actually, I guess if you play a Kaedweni Knight, and then you play Hensel. Does Hensel not pull Kaedwens? I think Hensel pulls Kaedwens. In which case you could Hensel it and get 2 more, which are both 13 strength, which is quite strong. So I think if this is Henseltable, I think it is. Let me know if I'm wrong in the comments below. I don't mind being wrong. But if this is Henseltable, it's very strong actually. It's kind of like the Siege Towers in that regard. I guess the Siege Towers are slightly more points and less restrictions. I don't know. We'll see. So that's Kaedweni Knight. Anyway, next up, Flail. Deal 5 damage and spawn a Draugr. Although on the dev stream it wasn't a Draugr, it was a Spectre, and it was Draug who spawns Draugr. But it was a 5 strength spawn and a 5 damage. So it's 5 damage and a 5 strength unit basically. That's what Flail does. Although they said something about 6 points on the dev stream, I didn't quite catch it. So maybe it's a 6 damage and 6 spawn. And they haven't got this quite up to date yet. We'll see. But ultimately, it's a bit boring. You know, it's 10 points. I think it's not that very good compared to other silvers. Like, I feel like this is a bit You know, there's kind of better options. Ultimately, you could just build a curse deck, and this does 7 damage and has 4 points. So it's ultimately worth 1 more point than this. Although this is an item, so you can target draw it with item pulling cards, such as is one of these pull items. I feel like one of these pulled items. Maybe not. Oh, here. Cayenne spawns an item, so you could spawn it with Cayenne, and, you know, maybe that would be good. Next up, we have Scoia'tael. And Scoia'tael, we got another mixed bag. There's some really cool cards here, and there's some cards that I think are absolute trash. So, first and foremost, we have Crushing Trap, which is an item. Deal 6 damage to each enemy, each unit at the end of a row. So, basically, units on either end, one at one end, one at the other end, so potentially this can be 12 damage. But it's an item, and that's where it gets interesting, because our good friend Pavko here, Pavko Gale, play a random bronze or silver item from your deck. So we can actually target draw this with Pavko, adding 12 points to him, making him a 17-point play. So cards that shoot at items, this is pretty decent, to be honest. The other item we actually saw here, we saw a couple. We saw Elven Blade, deal 10 damage to a non-elf unit. So this is 10 damage to one opponent. This is 6 to 2 on either end. So this is kind of positioning reliant, whereas this is more target. So for control, Elven Blade is probably better, even though it's 2 fewer points. Whereas Crushing Trap is just, you know, it's just for points. So it depends really what you're looking for with your deck, as to which of these you would run in terms of tutoring with Pavko. Alternatively, because he can also draw silver items, we then have Pit Trap. Item, special. Apply a hazard to an enemy row that deals 3 damage to units on contact. So I believe that means that, you know, when you play it and there's units in the row, each of those will take 3 damage. But they won't then continue to take 3 damage. They take 3 damage, but then if your opponent plays units into that row, they then take 3 damage. So with movement, this is actually a very strong effect, because you can then keep moving units into the spikes and dealing damage, extra damage from your movement. It's a really interesting card, and I'm looking forward to playing around with it. And again, because it's an item, you can tutor it with Pavko, so you can kind of improve the chance of drawing it. But it's also a special card, which means you can play it twice with Ithne. So there's kind of interesting options with this card, and I think it's going to be really cool. Last but not least for Scoia'tael, we have a really awesome card, Yorvith Meditation. Force 2 units to duel each other. So in a duel, one unit hits the other unit with its strength, damaging it. Then that unit hits back, damaging it so then that unit hits back until one unit dies. And bear in mind, you can do this with 2 of your opponent's cards. So you can make 2 of your opponent's cards fight to the death. And if the strengths are just right, you can more or less kill both of them. It really, you know, it depends a little bit on the strength as to how much value you can get out of this. But this is a very strong card. You know, if they have 2 quite strong units, say 2 16s, you make one attack the other, that's them both dead. You know, if they have an 8 and a 16, you could make the 8 hit the 16. So the 8 hits the 16, does 8, and then the 16 hits the 8 and kills it again. That's 16 points. But there's kind of maths involved, and there's going to be an optimum way of playing this. And this is going to make people rope a lot, I think. I think Yorvith Meditation, the amount of value in it is going to be quite interesting. Alternatively, you could have a very strong unit on your side, and then just use that unit to kill one of your opponents. It doesn't have to be within your opponent's units. Or if you're feeling generous, you could make your own units fight. But I feel like that's kind of a bit more niche, unless you're maybe trying to avoid a villain Trettenmirth, in which case there's some like 4 million IQ plays for you. You heard it here first, so when it happens in a tournament, then Jaggerous came up with it, you guys. Don't forget that. So last but not least, we have the lovely Skellige, you can see here. And then we have Clan Corsair, Dimon Support Doomed, Resurrect a Bronze Machine. So this is giving you extra Resurrects. It's basically like a Priestess of Freya, but you can only target machines, and in return, it's got 2 more points. So resurrect a bronze machine. Bear in mind, this is also doomed, so you know it's the same as Priestess of Freya in that regard as well. Machines are things like boats. The boats are often machines, for example, so you can use this to resurrect boats. Harpooners, for example, I believe are machines, so you could use it to resurrect them. And you can also use it to resurrect Warship, which is a machine. Deal 1 damage 4 times. Now what this means, deal 1 damage 4 times, is that it hits 1 unit 4 times for 1. Which means that with Axeman, or with Darren, whenever an enemy is damaged, boost this unit by 4, they would be getting 4 points of boost rather than 1. So it's 4 damage, but it's 1, 1, 1, 1. So this is a synergy card with Axeman, similarly to Darren, and I think I'm going to have a lot of fun with that style of deck. It's going to be really cool. Now, last but not least, we have Joanna. Todorok support. Heal a bronze or silver unit, then boost it by the amount healed. So we can use this to heal one of our own units, bronze or silver. Then it gets boosted by the amount healed, and she's got a 6 strength body. So I guess in self-wounding decks, this could be quite useful. You know, you could set up, say, a boat that's damaging a unit, damaging a unit, damaging a unit, and then once that unit is quite damaged, you can use the Joanna to then come in and heal it for a big, you know, a big play. I think it's going to be really interesting. I think it's maybe a card that people aren't going to suspect, and I think people are going to maybe underrate it. But with things like Wild Boar of the Sea, and the light longships, for example, you could definitely get quite a decent amount of value out of this card by healing the thing that you've just spent a load of time damaging. But it is damage over time, so you have to kind of be aware of that. And you have to be a little bit careful in that regard as to how you see value from this. I think it's going to be quite good with, say, Jenge, for example, because Jenge, you could play him, have him get damaged a bunch, then heal him and boost him. And because he's got so much base strength anyway, this is likely to be quite strong. So that is something worth being aware of. So I guess we'll kind of wait and see in that regard with Joanna. And that's it for the stream. They said that they would be showing more cards during Challenger, which is this weekend, so keep an eye out for that. I'll try and cover them as and when I can, but keep an eye out for that this weekend. There'll also be some content from Challenger on this channel as well to keep an eye out for. But beyond that, thank you so much for watching, and if you like this video, hit that thumbs up button. Let me know what you think of the newly revealed cards in the comments below, as well as the card changes, whether there's certain cards that you think are really strong or really weak, and how you feel about this new spawn/create mechanic. And you can always like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to catch me on Twitch, I'm twitch.tv/Jaggerous, and you can also find me on Twitter @Jaggerous. Have a very Merry Christmas, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next video. Bye!